Welcome back to another episode of Industry's Garage. Today we want to talk about this motorcycle that we've been working on with the Dyno, and one of the complications that Eric has discovered in trying to fine-tune this thing is just the simple fact that there were some modifications done to this bike prior to receiving it, and as a result of those modifications being done, there was some damage that was done to the carburetors. So Eric, when we got this thing on the dyno, you were able to make a couple of passes, and from the footage that we've got, I mean, it clearly shows that with the jets that you were putting in this thing to get it to run properly, it just didn't seem to want to work right.
To tuning at all. It had issues idling. It would die for no reason. We thought at one point maybe had a problem with the battery. The battery was a little bit low. Didn't fix the problem with the battery. Somebody had been into the carburetor before we got a hold of it, and here's the sticky problem where it exceeds what we've talked about before about what a customer has asked you to do. Working within the boundaries of what the customer asked us to do, we got no results with jet changes. Very, very minute, but not major changes like we needed to have. So at some point in time, a shop is going to have to take it upon themselves to find out why we're not getting any results. So what we found was that at some point in time, whoever owned the motorcycle prior had gotten into the air-fuel ratio plugs where they plug off a carburetor at the factory to keep you from turning the air-fuel ratio screws.
Right.
All right. So a lot of the jet kits you acquire, that's one of the things that we have to change when we change air cleaners and we change exhaust systems, is we also have to set air-fuel ratio screws at different settings, okay, from factory. So you have to remove those plugs. You have to be very careful in removing those plugs because you can damage the air-fuel ratio screws. Now from the outside looking in, it didn't look like there was any damage to the air-fuel ratio screws, and you could turn them in and you could turn them out and the motorcycle would already run, okay? Well, we didn't get any kind of results in adjusting the air-fuel ratio screws. We took the time to have the carburetors off and to have them down much farther than you would need to have them down initially to install a jet kit. When we did that and pulled the little air-fuel ratio screws out, we noticed that the tips of the little needles were broken off and are actually wedged down into the carburetors.
So when you're talking about this particular set of air-fuel screws,
yeah,
okay, and you say it's got needles on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, normally aren't the air-fuel screws on some carburetors, isn't it just like a tapered point?
Some have a big wide taper point, but some, in the situation of this bike, actually has a very, very small needle that protrudes out of the end of the screw. And it's very easy to break those off in a carburetor if you're not careful. All right, YouTube. So here's what we found out with the Triumph Thunderbird here, is the customers brought it to us, had a jet kit they'd bought online somewhere, had attempted to try and put the jet kit in themselves, weren't getting any kind of results that they would like after purchasing the used motorcycle with information from its previous owner that it needed to have a jet kit put in it and dyno tuned. We have installed the jet kit into the Thunderbird. We ran it on the dyno several times, as you've seen, and we could get small, minute improvements, but we couldn't get any kind of actual repeatability in the motorcycle, and drivability never cleaned up. It may have had a really good curve up high in certain RPMs, but it didn't carburate cleanly down low, no matter what we did, even outside of the jet kit. So at some time in the motorcycle's life, somebody had gotten into the carburetors on the air-fuel ratio side. They did drill out the plugs. However, what we had found was even though the needles seemed to be adjustable, you could thread them in, you could thread them out. The problem was that inside, where you really couldn't see unless you had the carburetors as far apart as you could get them, was that they'd broken the tips of the air-fuel ratio screws off, which is very easy to do. The downfall of it is once you break those off into a carburetor, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's highly unlikely that you can ever retrieve any of the broken pieces back out of it once they're wedged into the hole. So at this point, what are our choices? We have two. We can come up with another set of carburetors and start from scratch with a jet kit, or we can buy a set of aftermarket carburetors and set them up for the motorcycle. Both of them are pricey.
You know, Eric brings up a great point. A lot of times when people start to fix their bikes, or they have a situation where they've read some information on an online forum, or look at a service manual incorrectly, a lot of times it says only tighten to where it barely stops. And it usually has a warning label on there that says do not over tighten these screws or damage can occur.
That is true.
And in the event that something like this happens, you may or may not know the type of damage that you have caused. And just like what Eric has talked about in this episode, you know, customer had some work done on the bike prior to being received at the shop here, was under the clear impression that all it needed to have was a couple of dyno runs, put a jet kit in it so that this motorcycle could function properly. And it wasn't until after multiple dyno runs that it was clearly determined that this particular bike, no matter what jet kit was put into it, no matter what air-fuel ratio setting was happening, it wasn't going to run properly. This is a perfect example of a situation in which a customer is under the impression they're going to spend a certain amount of money. They find out the hard way that they're going to end up spending a lot more money because what they thought was going to be a simple project ends up costing a lot of money because of the time involved. As Eric has talked about, is, you know, now we either have to buy a new set of stock carburetors, or they're going to have to buy a set of aftermarket carburetors to make this thing work. I'm Reed, this is Eric. Thanks for watching another episode of Industries Garage. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up and please subscribe so we can continue to show more information about fixing motorcycles, putting on parts, doing test rides, and just enjoying the motorcycle industry as a whole. Thanks again.